Hey, Dog Nation, happy Monday and happy Thanksgiving week. I know many of you are off this week, so if you are, enjoy that time with family and friends. We appreciate you sharing some of that time with us here on DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Georgia United Credit Union. I'm Brandon Adams, of course, and glad to have you with us. John Stinchcomb coming up in just a moment. A lot to do today, reacting to the good and the bad and the otherwise for Georgia's win against Texas A&M and the look ahead to clean old-fashioned hate on Saturday against Georgia Tech and the SEC championship game after that against LSU. I think there's a lot to be happy about, a lot to feel good about, but also some legit concerns there as well. We will deal with all of those things over the course of our program today. I do notice that I've forgotten to put Eddie here on the desk. He's going to be upset about that, but I'm sure he'll be with us before the show is done. I'm just glad to have you with us. Eddie will get in a moment. The important thing is to know that you are with us right now, and with that in mind, we get ready to say DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Georgia United Credit Union, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Georgia United Credit Union. Show your team pride with the Georgia Bulldogs debit card. Check out gucu.org/GoDogs for more details.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
First of all, quick thanks to the UGA bookstore. I got my DawgNation, or I shouldn't say DawgNation, I should say UGA SEC East Champion t-shirt here on today. And big thanks to Michael Carvel for bringing Eddie on the desk. I almost forgot him there. And with that in mind, we're off and rolling on DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Georgia United Credit Union. Let me begin with the story, if you don't mind. I thought Saturday was actually a great showing by UGA fans. We talked about hashtag best for last week, the notion of UGA fans being at their best for the last day for some Georgia seniors and some guys who are juniors who are probably going to go on the NFL draft, honoring them by making an incredible atmosphere on Saturday in Sanford Stadium. Now, the weather prohibited, I think, some of that from taking place, but honestly, not a ton of it. I thought overall it was an unbelievable showing for UGA fans. One moment in particular really stood out to me. After the George Pickens touchdown, there was this huge downpour of rain that sort of popped up just briefly, and Georgia fans cheered loudly for it because they obviously knew their team had gotten a score, and A&M was about to get the ball back, and the rain was going to kind of upend progress they were going to hope to make. And then you had kind of the Seven Nation Army that kind of kicked in, the crowd just going crazy, making a lot of noise, even though the rain is raining really hard. And sitting from my spot with the rest of the coastal elites in the press box kind of looking down on this, it's hard not to imagine these Georgia fans in that moment were having the time of their lives. It was really kind of a really fun thing to experience, kind of a beautiful thing to watch. And as I'm watching that unfold, it's also very difficult not to draw the contrast between how Georgia fans were experiencing this away from social media, because for the most part, the in-stadium experience, no matter which SEC venue you're talking about, it's kind of a social media-free environment because sometimes cell reception can be kind of hard to get. How these fans were experiencing this compared to those who were on message boards or on Twitter or anywhere else that folks are gathering online, where seemingly those Georgia fans are not capable of enjoying anything. Let me give you an example of this from Twitter. This tweet kind of got some attention this weekend. I don't know this gal very well. She's an Atlantic writer, so she's obviously a lot more educated than I am, but she's apparently a Georgia fan as well, living in New York City. Her tweet got a lot of attention. Georgia's dream to win the national championship while not allowing anyone to enjoy a single second of a football game they're playing in, well, it's still alive. Amanda Mull, writer for The Atlantic, says. I thought that was kind of a funny tweet and kind of, I think, embodying the way a lot of Georgia fans feel about this. And it's amazing the divide. Around here, we've kind of made our peace with the fact that the Georgia offense is just not really doing its job to the full extent right now, and yet Georgia is seemingly kind of trying to find a way to win anyway and putting themselves in a pretty good position for the college football playoff overall. That's kind of the way this is kind of playing out right now. Other Georgia fans are just sort of more bothered by that, more frustrated by another game that's kind of close in the late stages, Georgia having to make some clutch plays to pull out this win, and it kind of leads to that divide among fans. And as I said before, I think the split here kind of determines how much social media you're consuming, how much message board culture you're consuming on one of these game day Saturdays. The more you're able to kind of unplug from the online stuff and just kind of be face-to-face with Georgia fans, especially if it's in the stadium, the more I seem to think that you're kind of enjoying all of this right now. And listen, we're not going to explain away the bad play by the Georgia offense. We'll do a lot of that on today's program. But I would say that the fans who are so bothered by Fromm struggles, and they were real, the offensive struggles, and they are real, the fans who are so bothered by that, to the extent that I have any influence over you whatsoever, my advice would be, can you just push the pause button on your hot take for like 1 second? Would that be so hard to do? Because honestly, here's kind of what I want to do. For every Georgia fan who feels like Georgia is definitely going to lose to LSU because of how bad the offense is right now, I'd love just to sort of put something online that's your sort of free "see I told you so" card. And you can play that you can play that card after the SEC championship. If it truly works out the way you think it's going to work out, then by all means play that card then. Show off the "see I told you so" card. What is it from? Is it Seinfeld and Festivus where they have the airing of grievances? I was never a huge Seinfeld fan. We'll have the airing of grievances after the SEC championship. And all the offensive woes that Georgia has that you say now are going to prohibit Georgia from winning the SEC and making the college football playoff, we will air all of those grievances then. But for this particular moment, can we just save our takes? I mean, listen, and I'm as guilty as anybody of kind of spewing off hot takes about what the Georgia offense is. You can find that kind of stuff online, whether previous episodes of our program or stuff that I've written for DawgNation.com. But somewhere along the way, I just sort of decided, let me just save my take. Let me just kind of wait and just let this thing kind of play out. Because if you go to ESPN.com, they've got their playoff predictor up. According to ESPN, Georgia's got a 50% chance of making the playoff, which will obviously require, beating Georgia Tech, beating LSU in the SEC championship, a feat that some of you would say is impossible based on the way the Georgia offense is struggling, but ESPN calls it a coin flip. Now, I don't know how their mathematicians arrive at that, but I'm going to trust them more than I'm going to trust some of you right now. Your take on the dismal nature of the Georgia offense may turn out to be true. But would you mind just waiting until after the SEC championship game to say to all of us, "See, I told you so. See, I told you they weren't going to be able to get it done"? Would it be so hard just to wait for the Tech game, wait for the LSU game, and then if your dire prediction comes true, then I will give you free reign here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union, to express that take and say, "I've been saying that way all along. I've been saying that all along." But just wait and do it then. That's at least my thought on that. Now, with that said, let me kind of turn the page here for a moment and kind of talk about the Georgia offense. Let me tell you something I really believe and hold close to. What is it? I hold these truths to be, self-evident? Here's a self-evident truth in my mind. Faulty analysis is the same thing as fake news. And there is a lot of faulty analysis kind of out there about the Georgia offense. Going back to the beginning of the season, when the offense was also not exactly playing particularly well, there was this narrative of, well, you got to understand, this is exactly the way that Kirby Smart wants his offense to be. That was always faulty analysis to me, and I think it's been even proven more true now. And the reasons why, supposedly, according to some in the media, that Kirby Smart wanted his offense to be this way were all bizarre, and there's an endless list of them. Whether it's, well, this is how he's going to do things to sort of protect his defense. Never mind the fact that the number one team in terms of points allowed this season is also the same as the number one team in points scored. Put that aside for a moment. That's what some people said. And then it was about avoiding injuries, and then it's about this, and then it's about that. There's been all kinds of reasons why Kirby Smart supposedly wants his offense to be run a certain kind of way. But here we are after the 10th game of the season. We can kind of no longer say that the Georgia offense is performing the way that Kirby Smart wants it to. Now, maybe some of his philosophical stuff has impeded the success of the offense. We can certainly talk about that eventually. But for now, I think we can now say and know fully and clearly that this is not what Kirby Smart wants his offense to be in terms of its overall level of production. And I'll give you a few instances from Saturday. First of all, there was the funny remark from Smart after Rodrigo Blankenship became Georgia's all-time leading scorer. An amazing accomplishment for a player that's been brilliant at Georgia for his career. And now, this is only part of what Smart said about Rodrigo, but it's the funny part. Here is Smart in kind of a backhanded compliment to his own offense, congratulating Rodrigo for becoming the all-time leading scorer. Here's Smart on that.
I also want to congratulate Rodrigo. That's a tremendous honor. I mean, we certainly have helped him with it because we kick a lot of field goals. But
yeah, the idea of kicking a lot of field goals, there's definitely probably too much of that for a lot of Georgia fans' taste, especially in a day like Saturday where it just wasn't quite clicking, really never for the entirety of the game. And after the kind of funny remark there, Smart got a little more serious, a little bit more specific about his feelings right now about what the offense is not quite getting done. Here's Smart again.
Offensively, we've got to improve. I think there's no bones about it. We've got to improve. There were things tonight that we missed that were there. And that's the frustrating thing, because I'll get 100 questions about the inability to hit explosive plays, inability to hit runs. But when you get an opportunity on 1st and 10 to make the plays that we had, you got to make those. And some of that had nothing to do with calls. Some of that had to do with execution. So we share in that. I share in that, and we got to do a better job.
I can't make you feel better about the way the Georgia offense played on Saturday, but it ought to make you feel at least a little bit better that Smart is now acknowledging what is plainly happening to all of us right there in front of our eyes. This offense is not quite getting it done. And for Jake Fromm, he's going to kind of be in the spotlight on this. The Georgia quarterback now a third consecutive game with less than 50% of his passes completed. I don't care what you attribute all that to, some of that obviously belonging to Fromm, maybe some of that belonging to some others. The fact of the matter is, less than 50% completion percentage 3 games in a row wouldn't be good for any quarterback, and it's outright odd that a guy like Jake Fromm, who's done as much as he has in his Georgia career, has dealt with such a kind of miserable stretch here as of late. I don't care how good the defenses have been. Once again, Smart kind of laid it out on the line about what he saw from Jake and what he wants to see a little more of. Here is some candor once again from Smart.
Well, I mean, he made some back shoulder throws that were pretty special. I mean, he hit Kieris, he hit Tyler, he hit George. He did some really good things. So concern is not there. I want to get better. The kids want to get better. You know, everybody's like, well, what's wrong with the offense? Well, when the offense stays aggressive and we mix things up, we hit some inside runs, outside runs, you know, we're better. But we're also playing a stretch run of some pretty good defenses. And I know that defense hadn't played good all year, but they played good recently. And I got a lot of respect for their defense and the way they played tonight.
So obviously that's kind of a little bit of a happier face on the performance for Fromm on Saturday than maybe coming from some fans. But my advice on the evaluation of Fromm is the same as my advice on the evaluation of the Georgia offense overall. It has not been great for Fromm as of late, and there's probably pockets of the media maybe a little bit slow to admit that, and that frustrates some fans, and I kind of get all of that. But here's, I think, the more, I guess, realistic take when it comes to Fromm. This is a quarterback who's played bad lately, but has played great at different times in his Georgia career. So the one thing that Georgia fans ought to remind themselves of and keep in mind for the rest of the season, that a quarterback who's been great before, a quarterback who's made big throws before, there's a very good chance he will return to that quarterback, to return to being that quarterback before this season is done, or certainly before his UGA career is done. So fair to evaluate what the performances have been from Fromm as of late, and I think on this program we're going to do that. But unfair to say, well, this is now who Jake Fromm is. Jake Fromm is just no longer a good quarterback, or now rewriting history to say that he never was. To me, what you have going on with Fromm is a good quarterback going through a bad stretch. And the reasons for that, honestly, none of us may ever really truly know what it's all about. How much that's been impacted by rain, how much that's been impacted by this weird-looking glove that he was wearing, how much that's been impacted by the fact they've just been playing good defenses as of late. We don't really necessarily know the answers. Ultimately, the answers may not be all that important. He's got to play better than he has played. But for a quarterback who has played well before, the chances of Fromm eventually playing better are actually kind of probably pretty good. So, listen, this will fall on deaf ears for some, but I'm going to say it again anyway. For those who think the offense for Georgia is just so bad that the SEC championship is now a waste of time, can you just push pause on that and let the rest of us enjoy it? You may end up being right. You may end up being able to say, I was right all along because I tried to tell you back in blah, blah, blah. If that's the case, then we'll air those grievances then. But for now, this is a Georgia team on Saturday that got its 10th win. Just came through a really tough stretch in November, having won all of those games. And frankly, the defense continues to flex. And we'll kind of get into them a little bit more in the moment. There is still more work that Georgia has to do, and there are still some causes for concern that certainly make it a possibility that Georgia won't accomplish the goals that it set out to accomplish at the beginning of the season. But I think we need to let those moments kind of play out before we decide exactly what this Georgia team is going to be and what its ultimate legacy as far as 29 is concerned, what that will be. Let's find out then, and let's wait and push pause on our hot takes for now. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Georgia United Credit Union, and we're happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Radio Noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really, really glad to have you with us. And we'll get John Stinchcomb here in a moment. I'm already kind of running a little late on him, but we'll get to him here in a second. A couple things to remind you before that. As I said before, we're brought to you today by Georgia United Credit Union. And, boy, as we head towards the holiday season, you know, you're buying a lot of gifts. I think buying those gifts is fun already for the friends and family in your life. Made more fun, though, when you use the Georgia United Credit Union official Georgia Bulldogs debit card. 3 different design options for you to choose from. And it's free to you when you open a Georgia United checking account that also includes options to earn interest. We've been telling you now for a while that Georgia United Credit Union is so much more than a bank. With 19 branch locations, access to 100,000 surcharge-free ATMs, enhanced security features, and convenient access to your money through online banking. And membership is easy to sign up for. Just go to this website for more information on GUCU and, of course, to find out about your Georgia Bulldogs debit card. It's gucu.org/GoDogs. The website, once again, gucu.org/GoDogs. Also, quick reminder here as well, the week of the SEC Championship game, DawgNation going to be live back at the Marlows and Peachtree Corners again. What an amazing event this is going to be. Not just me, not just John Stinchcomb, who's going to join us here in a moment, also Jeff Sintel there as well, looking ahead to the start of the early signing period for recruiting. So that's all going down 6 p.m. Thursday, December 5th at the Marlows Peachtree Corners, 5210 Town Center Boulevard. 5210 Town Center Boulevard, Peachtree Corners for the location there on that. And by the way, we are still doing our Marlows matchup VIP giveaway. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this before. You can enter for your chance to win VIP seating for 4, dinner for 4, and we're going to throw in a DawgNation gift package there as well. So you'll have the best seat in the house, the best experience possible, including some of the delicious chef-inspired food from Marlowe's. You'll have all that for you for the big event there on December 5th. But you got to register for your chance to win by going to DawgNationHelp@gmail.com. The email, once again, DawgNationHelp@gmail.com. And just put Marlowe's in like the subject line. Give us your information. We'll take all of those. We'll kind of put them in a big hopper. We'll draw out the winner, and we'll let you know who the winner is coming up on December 3rd. That's for our big Marlowe's matchup event live at the Marlowe's and Peachtree Corners coming up on Thursday, December 5th. All right, with all of that said, let me now turn our attention kind of back to the Georgia offense for a bit on Saturday and kind of the weird moment that seemed to happen very late in the game. We've already talked about Jake Fromm struggling. Not exactly a great day for Fromm, a day that he'd like to relive and maybe do some things differently. And there was also the moment where there, seemingly a misread of the defense. Deandre Swift essentially left out to dry and, nowhere to go on a handoff there late in that game. And Swift, if you're watching on TV, this is, I think, a little bit more obvious to you, showed some visual displeasure with Jake Fromm on all of that. A little bit of a dust-up, it was called by some members of the media. Smart's characterization of this was a little bit different. Here's what Smart had to say.
I wouldn't call it a dust-up. I mean, it's just he's frustrated. It's a situation where we don't run that play into a pressure from that side. They did a good job disguising it. We had told Jake to milk the clock. So when you milk the clock, you can't change the play. You milk the clock, you got to run the play. So it wasn't a great play into that. But that's called passion. It's not dust-up. That's love. When you have a family, your family don't always get along, right? But they love each other. And those two young men love each other as much as anybody.
Yeah, so listen, I'm not scandalized by this. I said this on our Pella Window postgame show on Saturday. Football is a competitive sport. Sometimes the competitive fire comes out at the expense of your opponent, and sometimes it comes out at the expense of one of your teammates when you're all kind of fighting for the same thing. And that fire, no doubt, burns in Deandre Swift. He's trying to be a leader here late in the season, and that includes sometimes even leading Fromm. And I got no problem with that whatsoever. The idea that somehow Jake Fromm sheds tears over this or Deandre Swift is all up in his feelings over this after it's all said and done, I think that's no big deal whatsoever. I don't think the Georgia fans should be worried about that either. In fact, the fact that both these guys want this so bad, I think, is one of the reasons why you trust them with the ball in their hand here late in the game. Swift, obviously, but Fromm there as well, just given some of the big throws he made in the Florida game earlier this year and some of those there as well. I mean, Kirby Smart said that on Saturday too, that even in the midst of an offense not currently getting it done, at least from the statistical measures, it's hard, maybe it's important to go back and remember all the times in which it's gotten done in the past. And a lot of the time, these two guys that were kind of seemingly at odds at the end of the game on Saturday, Fromm and Swift, they've been the guys there leading the way on that, and Smart talked more about that on Saturday.
Talk about competitive nature. I mean, when you look at Deandre Swift and he wants the ball in the fourth quarter and he puts the team on his shoulders and he breaks 3 tackles to get 7 yards and makes one of his best career runs, and Jake wants the opportunity to throw a strike in there to Dom when they're pressuring. I mean, some of those things were really key, and that's the one thing that has been consistent with this team. When your back's against the wall and you got to get a first down, most games they've been able to do that. This one. And the Florida one, it was big. We didn't get it done against Auburn, but the defense stood up. I mean, they've done a good job with backing each other up.
Yeah, I think that's mostly right. It hasn't been a perfect season for the Georgia offense, but they've kind of come through for the most part when it matters. Certainly for Deandre Swift, that was definitely true on Saturday. And after the game, he talked about the fire that he has inside of him to make sure that's the case, and his challenge to the rest of the Georgia offense to kind of follow his lead right now. This is good stuff from Swift.
Just get as many first downs as we needed to win the game. We fought the 4 quarters. We can't ask the defense to throw a shot out every game. Offensively, we got to get better, but we found a way to win tonight. It was an emotional win.
Where do they have to get better?
Offensively? Yes. Sustain drives. I can't put it on one person, can't put it on two. We just got to come together and be focused as a unit, sustain better drives.
So there's a lot about the Georgia offense you probably wish was different right now, but you couldn't ask for better leadership than you're getting from Swift there in the moment. In fact, Jake Fromm, who was on the kind of the receiving end of some of that leadership on Saturday, pretty much said the same thing on Saturday himself, that, yeah, DeAndre's that guy who just shows that fight for the full 60 minutes, and he's challenging the Georgia offense to kind of join him in that cause. Here's Fromm on Swift.
He's a horse. He's a guy who knows that they're always trying to put that extra hat in the box, and he can go out and he says, hey, I'll take one guy, I'll make him miss, and that's what makes him special, taking on that responsibility and that role and going out and making plays.
Yeah, so listen, I mean, like I said, I'm not scandalized with the fact they kind of had a little bit of words with each other, and I think you trust Deandre Swift being a big leader for your team going forward. I think that Jake Fromm, who didn't play his best on Saturday because he's done it before, I think he's the guy that you're going to be able to trust again. And, you know, these folks who may say the SEC championship has already been decided, I don't think football's quite that easy to predict. Before I get John Stinchcomb, and boy, I've kept him waiting today, let me kind of dive in here and remind you about my friends at Brasstown Valley Resort. Still time for you to take advantage of the big specials and savings they're offering in honor of their 25th anniversary. You can celebrate by getting 25% off on select rooms here in the month of November while that lasts, and then throughout select dates in December there as well. Just make sure you use the promo code BVR25. That's BVR25. When you go to BrasstownValley.com, save up to 25% here heading through the month of December on select dates. But you got to use the promo code BVR25. Make sure you check that out at BrasstownValley.com. All right, we are obviously trying to do a lot on today's program, a lot of offensive stuff kind of off the top here. We'll get some defensive stuff later on, including the fact this group, I think, continues to kind of live up to exactly what it's supposed to be, even if at times, let's face it, they're kind of forced to be put into some bad spots there at the end of the game. I like what Deandre Swift said a moment ago about, listen, you can't keep putting him in that spot, ask him to pitch a shutout week after week after week. We'll talk about the defense here later on. But for now, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union, let's talk to John Stinchcomb and get his thoughts on what was against the Texas A&M Aggies.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
You know, I really love our conversation with John Stinchcomb here on Mondays on DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union, because John tells it like it is, and his insight into the game, I think, is really pretty exceptional. So, John, we appreciate you being with us here today. Obviously appreciate your time as always. And if you don't mind, let me just kind of dive into it. There are some folks around DawgNation, John, who are so concerned about the nature of the Georgia offense right now, and there's clearly some statistical reasoning to point to for this, but they're so concerned about the Georgia offense right now, they would look at the SEC championship game and say, oh my gosh, I don't know how a Georgia team beats an LSU team that's undefeated and ranked number 1 right now and kind of everything that they have going on, that this is a matchup that's just not going to go well for Georgia because Georgia has sputtered a little bit in some of its recent games. What do you kind of think about the SEC championship right now based on what you've seen from Georgia these last few weeks, both for the good, the fact they keep stringing together victories, and the not so good, the fact that they are doing this with seemingly as little offense as a winning team could ever produce?
Well, I understand the sentiment, but I love the fact that you actually have to play the game. On paper, Georgia's offense hasn't looked great the past few weeks. Even on the eye test, they haven't. But the SEC Championship's its own game. You get out there, and we've seen Jake Fromm in the moment in those big games. He steps up. And did he play well this past Saturday? No, it wasn't his best game. It was probably one of his worst. But if you're trying to look at his body of work and say, is this a guy that I can trust in a big game moment? I think he's proven that he's more than capable of stepping up and answering the bell, so to speak. So for all those who think, it's a foregone conclusion, I think they're wrong. I think you have to get out there and play the game. Georgia has to play better offensively. That's a given. They cannot go out there and miss opportunities like they did against Texas A&M, and they can't sputter like they did late in the game versus Auburn. So do they have to play well? Well, yeah, of course. I mean, you're looking at arguably the best team in college football, meeting them in Atlanta in a big stage opportunity where everything's on the line. You want to play in the college football playoff? You got to beat the best. And right now, LSU is proving that they're either the top team in the country or one of the top two teams in this country, and Georgia's got to be able to answer the bell.
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's my take on this. Georgia's going to be an underdog to LSU for a reason, and you cited a lot of those reasons, but I firmly believe that it's just as hard right now to score on Georgia's defense as it is to keep LSU's offense from scoring. And, you know, Joe Brady and Steve Ensminger and these offensive minds for LSU, I think are going to have as many late nights watching film of the Georgia defense as Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann are going to have watching film of the LSU offense. I think what Georgia does defensively presents just as much of a challenge as what the LSU offense presents for UGA. Sometimes that may not seem like it's true because whether fans want to admit it, we all kind of have a pro-offensive bias in our mind. But the Georgia defense, I believe, statistically speaking, has been essentially just as dominant as the LSU offense is. It's just it's not going to get quite as much attention. And that doesn't mean that I believe that Georgia's going to win the game. Right now, I don't want to make my pick. I'm going to reserve my right not to. And obviously, I've got great respect for what LSU's done this season. But the idea that LSU is chomping at the bit, licking their chops to play Georgia, John, I can promise you that's not the case, and it sounds like you agree.
I couldn't agree more because Georgia's defense is elite. And there are a few elite defenses in the college landscape right now. Georgia is probably, in my opinion, of the teams I've seen, has the best defense in college football. And what makes it unique is that there's not that one guy, there's not those two guys that you circle and say, well, you know, you look at Ohio State, they got Chase Young. Chase Young is by far the best defensive player in college football right now. Georgia doesn't have that guy. There's not one particular player that you have to circle and say, if we don't handle him, we're going to have problems. I think what Georgia does really well is they play team football. It's almost a lost art at every level. That defensive line, Tyler Clark, has continued to impress. The linebacking play, I think, has only gotten better in coverage. I think they started off really good in the run game and have improved in the pass game. And then the secondary, despite the fact that you continue to and have health issues, I mean, you lose Stokes and you get some other guys back. I mean, this defense is, I saw it being discussed after the game on Saturday. Is this one of the best defenses Georgia has ever fielded? And I would say the answer to that is absolutely. So if you're LSU, you're not coming into this game saying this is going to be a cakewalk. I mean, I understand that LSU has one of the best offenses in the game right now, but they haven't seen a defense like Georgia. And I think on the other side of the ball, despite the fact that Georgia hasn't been able to put together in what I would call a complete game offensively all year, they've got the pieces. They've got look across the board. They may not have the most experienced and developed wide receiver core, but they have the weapons across the board and the offensive line to create the space in the run game and to give the quarterback time in the pass game. So I think that's probably why there's so much frustration in the fan base. It's amazing to me that you have a 10-win regular season game or regular season record with one game still to play, and there's such what do you want to call it, consternation from the fan base.
Yeah.
Just because we all recognize there's so much talent in the room.
So let's have a solutions-oriented conversation with the Georgia offense here for a moment. I want to do two quick issues on this. Let me start with Jake Fromm, and I think that as simply as I can put it, it seems like Fromm's confidence is a bit shaken right now because he's just not playing as well as we're used to seeing him play, and it's seemingly for inexplicable reasons, although the absence of Lawrence Cager has been a factor here. But, I never would have imagined at the beginning of the season that Cager would be that important, but I guess that's kind of turned out to be the case. Nonetheless, John, you're a smart guy. You played in the NFL. You had a great career in college. If I made you Georgia coach for a moment and simply gave you the task of restoring some of Fromm's confidence, how can a coach, how can a program kind of get Fromm back to feeling good about himself again, if that's indeed the case that he's not?
Well, you give him easy throws. I mean, you create situations for him to find success early, and that breeds confidence. I think that's a fair assessment. I think what's probably happened, and, who knows? This is all speculation. We're not in there. And I'm not in Jake's mind. I don't know what's going through his head, but I feel like he's tried to take more onto his shoulders because he considers himself, and he is a leader of that offense. And you hear and see that, man, I want us to do better. I'm going to take more on my plate. And you force it a little bit, and you start straining in situations where you don't have to. Jake Fromm is a great quarterback. He didn't play that way on Saturday, and candidly, I think there's been other games that probably fall in that same category for him. But I think the reasoning for his play is because he's trying to bear more of his fair share of the burden as a leader of that team. Now, you look at the season, and the weight of the poor performance, I think you can spread it around. I think Coley gets his share, offensive line gets their share, wide receiver core gets their share. I might give one pass. I'll give one pass, and that's Deandre Swift. I mean, every game, that guy, you look back at the plays that he makes, and there's a number of times where he turns a tackle for a loss into a 7-yard gain, or a tackle for a loss into a 3-yard gain, which is a win. And he continues to impress. There's a reason why he has the acclaim that he does, and he lives up to that billing almost week in and week out. So this game, Jake missed a lot of throws. Early on in the game, I understand that it's raining, but there's some what you would consider wide open receivers in the college game where there's separation, we just miss him. And, that's unfortunate. That's a problem. But you can't put that on Coley. You can't put that on the other guys. But there's been other opportunities that have been squandered, and those don't fall on Jake's shoulders. So everybody gets to bear that burden.
I want to ask you about the little, as kind of called, dust-up between Fromm and Swift at the end of the game. I'll do that coming up in a moment. Let me remind our audience before we get there, though, that, on Tuesday, December 3rd, that's kind of known as Giving Tuesday. We have Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and then we really kind of get serious about philanthropy on Giving Tuesday. And as that date approaches, I want you to keep the UGA Alumni Association in mind for your Giving Tuesday gift, because the donation that you make helps fuel the university that's really been changing the lives for the better, not just in our state, but across the world since the university first started in 1785. And the donation that you make on Giving Tuesday directly impacts the research that the university is doing. There are big-time solutions to big-time problems that people at UGA are working on right now, but obviously that research takes your donation. It takes money to get that done. And so on Giving Tuesday, which is Tuesday, December 3rd, you can make your gift to the UGA Alumni Association. Let me give you the website to kind of go to and think about when it comes to Giving Tuesday. It's give.uga.edu. Very simple to remember, give.uga.edu. That'll get you in touch with the UGA Alumni Association as we head towards Giving Tuesday on Tuesday, December 3rd. So, John, before you joined us, I talked about Swift, a little dissatisfied with Fromm. Kirby kind of explained it away. I've said I'm not scandalized by this. Football's an aggressive sport played by aggressive dudes. Not everybody's going to be singing Kumbaya for 60 minutes during a game. I'm guessing as a former player, you've probably had your share of choice words and maybe even been on the receiving end of some choice words from time to time. Isn't this just what football is? And every now and then the cameras are caught. They kind of catch these moments, but I'm guessing you're not too scandalized by this either.
Oh, talk about a non-issue. I mean, that is two leaders that are passionate about the game. They want to do it right. And I saw it live in action, and But, man, that is a non-issue that I'm sure people are going to want to spend some time on. In that situation, you're trying to run the clock down. Now, in an ideal situation, you recognize that they're bringing pressure off the edge of where you're about to run the ball. You check into a different play, and everybody's happy. Deandre gets smacked in the mouth because there's 2 seconds left. You're trying to run the clock down, and you don't check out of a play that you should. And so he's fired up, and Jake's going, I'm with you, man. I mean, I would love to check out. I'm just trying to run the clock down. So it's not the play that we want, but I'd rather have less time for Texas A&M at the end of the game than a 5-yard penalty and the perfect play going into that situation. Total non-issue. There's other times where you can see guys explode in a game, and that might be a problem. What you saw from Deandre Swift directed towards Jake Fromm, that's of no concern to anybody in that locker room, on that sideline, and it shouldn't be for the fan base. That, there's no bad blood there if that's the only indication or grounds for you to make that argument. I just think that DeAndre wants to do it perfect. He wants to win games and make plays for his team and so do the rest of those guys, and you just saw a little bit of that passion come out.
Let me squeeze in one final thing before we let you go. We've obviously taken a lot of your time today. So you were on the first Georgia team that had to play Georgia Tech, knowing it had an SEC championship game coming up the following week, and you guys won like 52-7 or whatever the final score was. But you were the first Georgia team to play that clean, old-fashioned hate game with the potential distraction of an even bigger game to come the following week. How much did Coach Rick talk to you guys about maintaining that focus, and I guess what was the strategy for making sure you kept the focus where it needed to be, at least for this week, on the in-state rival?
Well, let's be honest. It's hard. It's hard, especially in this scenario where, candidly, you probably don't need to play your dead-level best to win the game, and you know what's looming a week out. Now, what helps in that scenario is nobody in that locker room likes to lose to Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to hear is your in-state rival that you know you're better than have some grounds for chirping. Just you want to silence it early. And I think that's the motivation of just the last thing. The last thing you want is for Georgia Tech to say, "Oh, they belong." No, you don't. You don't belong on the same field as us right now. It's a fact, and you have to prove that. I mean, Georgia Tech's not going to roll over. They know their season is basically a lost cause, but man, what an opportunity for them to be spoiler against somebody that they're always trying to knock off the list. So the motivation is still there. It's just a matter of focus. It's a little bit more challenging to stay focused this week in preparation just because Georgia Tech is a lesser opponent right now, and you've got a really big game coming right behind it in the SEC championship. So you got to focus in, and I'm sure the coaches are going to be barking a little bit louder this week. There's plenty of opportunity for Georgia to get better, and that's what they're going to try to harp on and reinforce with this team is let's not focus on our opponent, let's focus on us. Let's focus on what we need to do to get better as a team so that we are prepared for whatever comes down the tracks for us the rest of the season, and that starts with Georgia Tech.
John, great stuff. Appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union today. I'll remind folks that we're still going to have a Marlowe's matchup coming up, even though it's Thanksgiving. We'll have one for you on Thursday, getting ready for clean, old-fashioned hate on Saturday. John, we just appreciate your time as always. Hope you enjoy the week, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you soon.
Look forward to it, B.A. Thanks.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so for the most part, broadcast schedule going to be the same. Now, we're pre-recording some of this week just because it is Thanksgiving week, but we'll still have Before the Hedges. We'll still have Marlowe's matchup. Still have Go with the Flow. Like a lot of these shows that we do during the week, they're still going to be there for us this week. But because of Thanksgiving, it'll be a little bit different. So for those of you, hope you're all getting ready for a big, happy Thanksgiving. Lots of food, good little bit of football, and heading towards the weekend, the traditional final regular season game for the Dogs against Georgia Tech, and then the SEC championship after that. However, for now, let's cruise around the SEC, and let's do so with our friends at Royal Caribbean and the all-new amplified Oasis of the Seas, which is a beautiful, beautiful sight to behold, and one of the great vacation experiences that you can have. Since 1969, Royal Caribbean has been redefining and setting the standard for what a cruise vacation is, and here as we head towards 2020, it's going to be even better than that, and the amplified Oasis of the Seas is one of the big reasons why. Whether it be the Ultimate Abyss, which is the tallest water slide at sea, the Playmaker Sports Bar and Arcade, which is like the classic sports bar with the wings, the burgers, the brews, kind of everything else, right there at sea, which is kind of amazing. Music Hall, which is like an amazing kind of like live music venue and nightclub type experience. Lime and Coconut, 3 stories worth of island vibes and just really, really fun stuff. The Bionic Bar, and if you watch the video, you see like the robotic arm kind of doing all that kind of stuff. It's just an amazing thing. Go to RoyalCaribbean.com. Here's what I know about you. You need a vacation. RoyalCaribbean.com is a vacation unlike any other, one of the boldest choices you can make for a vacation. RoyalCaribbean.com, that'll get you in touch with a travel advisor. And plus, you just kind of do a little shopping around and see all the really cool ports and all the really great ships that make Royal Caribbean so much fun. It's RoyalCaribbean.com. Okay, let me start with Oregon losing to Arizona State and the impact it has on Alabama. Obviously, it makes the Iron Bowl seem really interesting on Saturday. Bama's sitting at 5 right now, and I don't think that Georgia has any worry of dropping below 4, even with maybe less than a aesthetically pleasing game against Texas A&M. Georgia's path to playoff is simple. If it keeps winning its games, Tech on Saturday, LSU after that, it will moonwalk into the college football playoff. It's got nothing to worry about. But Alabama obviously trying to take that spot, depending on kind of how things go down, thinking of itself as a real playoff contender. Now, if Oregon wins the Pac-12, then the Pac-12 is excluded from playoff discussion. If Utah wins, I still think they're going to get heavy consideration because I do believe the committee wants the playoff to represent a national sport. You can't be national if the Pacific time zone is completely excluded from your sport and your conversation. So I believe that Utah, if it can beat Oregon, will get an extra look by the committee, but obviously Alabama wants to make it really, really difficult for those committee folks in terms of leaving them out, much the same way it happened in 2017. Here's ultimately what I believe my take on this is, though. Alabama, I expect to win the Iron Bowl on Saturday, but with Mac Jones at quarterback, I just simply don't believe Alabama's good enough to hang a number on Auburn. I don't. Winning the game, yes. Putting together some sort of big score that the committee is forced to pay attention to, especially given the fact that Auburn beat Oregon, that would make the committee have to pay a little bit more attention to that. I just don't think Alabama's that good. I mean, I think they're good enough to win. They are not good enough to go inside Jordan-Hare Stadium and blow out Auburn. Now, we'll find out about this if I end up being wrong. But for now, that's my take, is that it's an Alabama win likely again in the Iron Bowl. But the idea it's some sort of resume boosting, will be the only ranked win Alabama has, by the way, resume boosting win because of how badly they win. I just don't think Alabama's quite that good. Now, something else I was wrong about from the weekend was Tennessee. My pick in the game was Missouri, and Tennessee goes on the road, secures another win. That means if the Vols beat Vanderbilt to close out the regular season, they'll be at 7 wins. They'll exceed their Vegas preseason total, which was 6.5. They'll be back in a bowl after kind of a stretch here of not being a part of postseason play whatsoever. It's really an amazing turnaround for Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt, especially considering the fact that Tennessee had lost to Georgia State at the beginning of the season. This is quite an impressive performance. And when you watch Tennessee doing what it's doing, I'll tell you the school that I'll be paying very close attention to this is Florida. Because while Florida talks about trying to catch up with Georgia, you got to be careful that someone's not sneaking up behind you, and right now I think that Tennessee is. Now, I don't know that the 2020 class for the Vols is necessarily heading towards greatness, but Jeremy Pruitt has proven to be a better recruiter than Dan Mullen. So as long as they're competing side by side, head-to-head in recruiting, Pruitt's going to win more battles than not against Mullen. Mullen loses a lot off his team here this year. Pruitt's bringing in a Harrison Bailey, a quarterback out of Marietta, a lot of folks like. I think the SEC East is going to get really interesting in the future, where the idea that Florida, the only thing it has to worry about is how much closer it's getting to Georgia. I think the Vols might be a bigger rival for the Gators in future years than Mullen maybe wants to admit right now. Let me do one more thing here for a moment and kind of keeping the theme alive of what we're right about, what we're wrong about, something that most of us are probably wrong about. I know I was. I once laughed at Ed Orgeron as the LSU coach. I just thought of him as a cartoon character. And if you'll remember back at the time, there was all this talk of, could LSU get a guy like Tom Herman to be its coach? And Herman, leaving Houston, the job he had at the time, chose Texas over LSU. And there's this thought of, LSU can't get the best coach available. That's the kind of thing that a school like Texas does. LSU has to settle for its interim coach, Ed Orgeron. And, now Orgeron has been not just better than Herman, he's been one of the best coaches in all of college football. And Texas lost again on Saturday. They've really had kind of an awful season as a follow-up to the Sugar Bowl win against Georgia a year ago. And Ryan Clark, former LSU Tiger, now ESPN analyst, had a really funny tweet about this. Let me show you what he said about this. He says, as an LSU alum, I'd like to thank Tom Herman. A few years back, made the decision I never knew I wanted you to make. You chose Texas, and for that I am grateful. #Go Tigers, Ryan Clark says. And it's really true. The better coach between the two has been Orgeron. I once laughed at him, but no one's laughing now. And this was true even before he beat Alabama. His record against the spread, his record in SEC play, his record on the road. There are really no holes in the Ed Orgeron resume now that he's beaten the Crimson Tide. And as a coaching chess match type situation, he's not an easy guy to outcoach right now. Now, he's put good assistants around him, but that's something that Kirby Smart's going to keep in mind heading towards the SEC championship game. But for now, we'll make that cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let me talk for a moment here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union, about the Georgia defense and the job that it did on Saturday, once again kind of holding its opponent to a low number. And once again, there was kind of the late scores by A&M that made the game close, that sort of forced Georgia into a kind of a clutch mode, pressure situation there at the end of the game. Kirby, always holding his defense to a high standard, did say after the game that he wants to make sure those guys are closing out games, and I guess he's a little concerned about that right now. Here's what Kirby said about the defense.
Our defense was very resilient. I thought we got tired at the end of the game, and we're going to have to overcome that because 2 weeks in a row now we've kind of lost momentum late and struggled for a couple drives.
Look, I'm not quite as worried about that as Kirby Smart seems to be in the statement that you just heard from him. I think it's just really hard to keep any team off the board for the entirety of a game. I agree with what Deandre Swift said earlier in our program. It's unfair to ask the defense to essentially be perfect to give Georgia a chance to win. Just perfection for the full 60 minutes, pretty difficult to do. But nonetheless, this group did make plays when it needed to on Saturday after a couple scores got put on the board there by the Aggies. One of the guys that came up big there in that spot was Jordan Davis. Big sack late in the game. He talked about the feeling of being a part of a defense that has been able to get the job done for the Dogs all season long. Here's what Davis said.
We love it. I look forward to games like this. I always want a four-quarter war. Keeps us locked in, keeps us maintaining. Texas A&M, they play their butts off and respect them really heavily. Kellen Mond, he's a real great quarterback. And just being able to hold him and contain him and not allow him to get out the pocket is just an amazing feeling.
Another one of those guys that came up big for Georgia, another one of these veteran players at the linebacker position, Monty Rice, who was not healthy at the end of the season a year ago, but healthy right now and doing big things and also feeling really good about playing in these kinds of games and being a part of a defense that shows up big in these kinds of games. Here's Monty Rice.
When you sign your scholarship to play in this league, you signed up for games like that. We know especially the game ain't never over until it's over. And, that was a good finish by the defense, gave up some plays there at the end, but, we put a stop to it quick. Tyler Clark, with the sack, that's big right there, I think they even knocked him out of field goal range with that sack. He executed his call, he went and made a play.
Listen, my take on the Georgia defense is week in, week out, they are proving to be as advertised. And a huge weapon for the Dogs going into the SEC championship. And you better believe that LSU should be and is just as worried about that defense as Georgia is about LSU's prolific offense. Hey, one more quick thing to tell you about. My friends at MyBookie, you talk about predictions and games and who you think's going to win, who you think's going to lose. We get some right, we get some wrong. Many of you, though, get a lot of them right. And if you are getting them right, you're going to make some money off your expertise by signing up for an account at MyBookie and getting some action down on a game. And when you do, MyBookie's going to make you a big winner before you even win your first bet by giving you a big deposit bonus. You can get your first deposit doubled. I think you can get up to like $1,000. So you get more money into your account before you even start making your first picks. That's what MyBookie does for you when you use the promo code DawgNation. So here's how it works. Find MyBookie online. Just type MyBookie into your browser. They'll kind of do the work for you. Then use the promo code DawgNation. You'll get the big deposit bonus. Of course, that's all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG. Then after that, you play, you win, you get paid. So to recap here, find MyBookie online, put it in your browser, use the promo code DawgNation, get a big first deposit bonus. You want to get in on some Monday Night Football tonight or kind of anything else, NFL games, college games, everything in between. They actually have live wagering on NFL games. So it's an incredible fun thing. Check it out, MyBookie. Use the promo code DawgNation. All right, we appreciate all of you being with us here today for DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union. And, hopefully we've kind of struck the right balance here today. I don't want to make light of the fact that Georgia's got some real concerns, some things that's really, really in need of fixing. I thought you heard some great candor from John Stinchcomb on that. But at the same time, things with the Georgia offense aren't quite so dire for me that I'm somehow, and I'm speaking as a fan, you see me wearing those of you watching the video anyway, see me wearing the SEC East Champion shirt today. They're not so dire that I'm all of a sudden not looking forward to the SEC Championship, not a believer that Georgia could still win the national championship. It's going to be hard, and Georgia won't be picked to do it, and Georgia will have its doubters among the national media and opposing fans. But listen, I think overall Georgia's finding itself in a pretty good spot, and for now, I'm going to choose to enjoy that and hope all of you make the same choice there as well. Something I know you enjoy, Gator Hater Updater, standing at 1,122 days. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. Our friends at R.S. Andrews can do all of that for you, including that $99 mega furnace safety check, where they kind of just look all of that over to make sure it's ready to go for the winter that's essentially here. It's cold at night right now, for at least, if not during the day. And, all that kind of stuff that makes heat pump through your house, let's face it, some of that kind of stuff, you want to make sure it's working down there in kind of the lower part of your house, the corner of the basement you never go into, the crawl space, whatever else. Just make sure all that's working the way it's supposed to. So rsandrews.com can let you do that. That's the website, rsandrews.com. Get a $99 furnace safety check. All right, let me do Facebook first today because I started with YouTube on our Palo Window postgame show on Monday. And I've got like 15 minutes, then I've got to get off the air. So we'll do 15 minutes worth, and we'll kind of see what you're thinking, and we'll talk about what you want to talk about. We'll have a good time doing it all. Casey Cochran says, thank God for Hot Rod. Turned down a Florida scholarship to walk on at UGA. Listen, Hot Rod he's been amazing. He's really an amazing kicker and a terrific personality, and I'm glad to see him honored the way that he was on Saturday. John Chappell says, we've all done our fair share of complaining, but I'm with you, BA, going to enjoy this ride as long as it lasts. Yeah, I really think that's just the right way to say it. And for the people who are just dead set on telling us everything they know that's wrong with Georgia, I promise you, we will give you your chance. But we're not going to give it to you, the Festivus thing, the airing of grievances, we're not going to give it to you until after the SEC championship game. But on that day, you can play your See I Told You So card, and we'll do it all. I mean, we will just lay it all on the table. It'll be Tell the Truth Monday. But for now, we're going to do this. Myra Herbert Bush says maybe Jake needs his eyes checked out, missing players, not like him. Yeah, Myra, he hasn't been himself the last few games. Your only, I guess, hope now is that he just gets better. I think there's a chance that he will. Jeremy Chapman says, I'm with you on the offense and willing to go a step further. If we get past LSU with a win, we're set to make a good run of the team, getting 4 weeks to get healthy and time to work on our shortcomings. Yeah, I mean, like the chances of Georgia playing better in these upcoming games, I think are probably better than some people think. And there's not necessarily a logical reason why that would happen, but football can be an illogical sport. I mean, bring it back to gambling for a second. If you're so sure that Georgia's going to lose, there are places you can go to make some money on that information. I mean, but we all know that predictions when you're forced to put your money where your mouth is are not quite as easy to make at that point in time. So I'm not going to explain away the fact that Georgia has not looked great, but I'm also not going to close off the possibility that somehow it just kind of gets a little bit better, whether it's because, rain is no longer in the forecast for Georgia. Every game beyond Saturday, the rest of the season will be play with a roof over the head. Arizona's got a roof, right? So, I mean, every game the rest of the way, Georgia's likely to have a roof. So I don't know. I'm making light of it. But yeah, I think your point's a good one. John Arena says he's pulling for Auburn on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing Alabama left out of the playoff either, John. I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that at all. Derek Tillman says, my boy LeCount with the Savage pads on Saturday. Yeah, another forced turnover for him. An amazing job on, ripping that ball away from that tight end, trying to, fight for that first down yardage. LeCount has had a great season. And I just think, I think he's a big part of the success story for Georgia. And it's just really, really great to see and really, really fun to watch. And I think he's a huge fan favorite for good reason. He's got this amazing personality. He just seems like the funniest guy you could ever hang out with. I don't know him well, but just, from the times I've, had brief interactions with him, just funny personality, really good football player. I think LeCount was actually a better player last year than some people gave him credit for. And I think one of the things that hurt LeCount's image was the fact that anytime that he, had a shortcoming, he was so effusive in his own feelings about his shortcomings, basically, saying, yes, I need to do this, and yes, I need to do that, and yes, I need to do this. And while it's great to see him take such personal responsibility, and it's probably one of the reasons why he's improved as much as he has, he was taking so much personal responsibility for some of his shortcomings that it was almost, I believe, clouding the public about how good he actually was, because there were all kinds of stats out there a year ago that said LeCount really was having a pretty good year a year ago. But now, I mean, I think there's total clarity that he's one of the best safeties in the SEC. And he may have a decision to make at the end of the season. Obviously, I'd love to see him come back, but he's going to have that decision. If he doesn't choose to go to the NFL, if he chooses to come back to Georgia, I think he's more than an all-SEC candidate for the following season. I think that you'll see Richard LeCount on some preseason All-American lists. I do. Barry Gully calls him a standout defensive back. Good description. Those guys have weathered so many injuries, playing a lot this year with that Tyson Campbell at cornerback, having to play Saturday a good bit with that Eric Stokes. The dependable nature of those two safeties, LeCount and Reed, just a big reason why that's true, for sure. Chuck Pearson excited about seeing more Lewis Seen next year, and I think that's probably a fair thing to say. Mike Gay still feeling pretty good about the rest of the season. Mike, appreciate that. John Benton says, I think we match up well with LSU. I think their defense is a bigger weakness than our offense. Yeah, I mean, I think they've got their own concerns going into the game. I think that's probably true. It'll be interesting to watch LSU Saturday against the team that Georgia just played. I think that'll be kind of interesting to see. I don't really have a prediction on that game one way or another now. Jeremy Smith says dogs need to harness the fact they're underdogs. That's probably a pretty good idea. Feed off that a little bit. I think that probably makes some sense. Over here on YouTube for a moment. We've got about 10 minutes left on comments. What else is going on? Stuart Nick says, BA, one game at a time. We have the weapons. If we put it together, we can win it all, and it shouldn't surprise anyone. Plus, as much hate as Fromm is receiving, he plays his best in big games. I think that's true. And, part of the reason why I feel good about Georgia in the SEC championship, not saying they're going to win, but saying I expect them to show up and certainly, challenge LSU all day long and have a great chance to win. As painful as the second half of the SEC championship game was a year ago, hard to deny that the first half featured a great Georgia game plan. I thought they were very effective at challenging the Alabama receivers at the line of scrimmage. I thought they were quite disruptive against Tua Tagovailoa, more aggressive than they had been really in any other game that season, and offensively finding a way to get some things done. Now, I realize that football is a 60-minute game, and the second half left a lot to be desired. We won't have to rehash all that. Everybody knows those stories. But, you can make a case that Georgia played not just better, but different in the SEC championship game in the first half a year ago compared to some of the other games that played that season. Aggressive throws offensively, aggressive pressure on the quarterback. So I think that can be done again. Now, it just needs to happen for the full game. But, there are a lot of people who didn't think Georgia had a chance in last year's SEC championship game. I know they lost, but Georgia has been kind of written off before. So, yeah, I think that Georgia can feed off that negativity. And I think that taking it one game at a time, I agree with Stewart on that. That it's just, to me, one of the things that Kirby Smart has been pretty good about is the really, truly big games, finding a way to make sure that Georgia gets up for those big games. I don't think it's any small feat that Georgia won against Florida, against Auburn, and against Texas A&M, who I believe is one of the 25 best teams in the country. I don't believe it's any small feat that Georgia won those games all stretched out here in the month of November with Missouri thrown in for good measure. I think that's actually a pretty solid performance all along, even if the overall statistical part of it would suggest maybe more problems to come against even better competition. GB2 says, is it possible that Coley, who's quarterback's coach also, is changing something with Fromm and getting him off? You know, I'm open to any possible explanation on this, GB. You can say that Georgia's had kind of a downgrade in its offensive coaches, at least suggest that. Now that Chaney's not here, I don't know if that's true, but you can suggest that. You can suggest that the inexperience at receiver has hurt Fromm, and some people are certainly going to do that. You can suggest that, you know, that Fromm's been problematic all along, and it's just now kind of coming more to light. I guess you can suggest that if you want to. I, for the most part, am open to almost any possible solution for this, and maybe it's kind of a combination. I mean, certainly I think that Fromm's proven himself in the past to be a good quarterback in terms of what's keeping him from that now. I'm sort of open to a combination of things, and I just don't know. He looked really, really good against Tennessee, and for the most part, other than that, he's kind of had some struggles throughout the season. I think there was a time in which play calling probably wasn't helping him. I think the first half against Notre Dame is an example of what I thought was really ineffective play calling. But honestly, on Saturday, I said this on our Pella Window postgame show. Some of you may disagree, but I really didn't have a problem with the play call. I thought, to my eyes, Georgia was trying to do some of the things that I've been calling for them to do. They were throwing the ball to Swift more. I believe he had 4 catches. Some of it was the kind of, catches that don't really go for any yards. But they were trying to throw to him. They ran the flea flicker. That's pretty creative. They were doing some different kind of things. Still probably too many second down runs, all things being equal. But other than that, I kind of like some of the stuff they tried. So whereas I was probably heavily blaming coaches earlier in the year, I don't know that I'm doing that quite as much anymore. I think it's a tough thing to decipher right now. James Wade says, just enjoying the content. LSU is lurking. They don't have a backup or freshman quarterback either. Go Tigers. So James is here as an LSU fan. Nice to have him checking in today. Brandon Davenport says, I think Fromm is in his own head. He kept taking off and putting on the glove, rushing throws. Yeah, I'm a golf fan, and what Fromm did on Saturday reminded me of something. You ever watch the British Open, and there are certain guys that cannot get comfortable in that weather, and they'll put a pullover on, then they'll take it off. Then they'll put a pullover back on, then they'll take it off. Then they'll take a layer off underneath that. Because really golfers for the British Open, when it's really, really cold and oftentimes really, really rainy, they have many, many layers on. And so it's they have a different combination of layers for every hole. They just can't ever quite get comfortable. That seems to be what Fromm was dealing with on Saturday. There's no doubt that he knows he played badly against Kentucky, and he knows that he didn't even want to try to throw the ball against the Wildcats. And it was obviously really wet that day. I don't want to relitigate how wet it was or wasn't, but that was a bad day for him. And pretty clearly that day was back in his mind on Saturday. Otherwise, the whole glove thing probably never would have even occurred. Maybe Teddy Bridgewater from the Saints would tell you the problem is you need 2 gloves. Obviously, that's what Bridgewater is kind of famous for doing. But so on Saturday, maybe more up in his head than normal, maybe so. I thought John's description of this was a little interesting early in the show of he's trying to take on so much and do so much. I think the progression from being a freshman quarterback where very little is expected and then you exceed those expectations, going from that to a junior where a lot is expected and now you have to work really hard just to even meet the expectations, I do believe that's a pretty interesting mental hurdle to leap over. And for Fromm, that may be turning out to be a bit of a challenge. So some of this being slightly psychological. I think a lot of sports is psychological, to be completely honest. And so Fromm dealing with some of that right now, I think that's probably pretty fair. The Green Soldier, who was good to see on Saturday, says Saban is the GOAT, but he lost 2 of the 3 last national championship games, and Kirby's right in his heels. He'll win one more national championship for sure, but outside of that, I'm not quite so sure. So Green Soldier kind of weighing in on that debate. Buddy Lee Z, I'm going to go back to Facebook after this, says, my main problem is that we settle for field goals a lot. Do you believe it's due to the lack of confidence in the offense to not go for it on 4th down? So I think that, Buddy, this is one of those things where this is my least favorite thing about Kirby Smart. In addition for, settling for field goals, I mean, on Saturday, he punted from his 36-yard line, or from the 36-yard line. I jokingly said that I doubt there's a team in college football who's punted from closer in than that. The 36 is just, I think it's only 4th and 4. It's not like it was 4th and forever or anything like that. That's a moment where I think that Kirby, just generally speaking, is too conservative. And if I could wave a magic wand and just sort of change one philosophical thing about Georgia, when you are the more talented team, everybody who kind of follows the math of all of this would say that you're better off forcing the issue. You're better off pushing the issue. The idea of, well, I have more talent, therefore I'm going to try to avoid mistakes and win the game. If you're the more talented team, you ought to be able to absorb the mistake, which means that you should go for it on 4th down regularly, more often than not, maybe even. And, not settling for field goals, trying to get touchdowns, things along those lines. Now, Georgia did try kind of an unexpected onside kick on Saturday, so that's an example of trying to be aggressive, maybe trying to kickstart the offense along the way. But just generally speaking, buddy, I think even if the offense wasn't struggling as much as it is right now, I think Kirby has shown you over the years that he's a more conservative coach than he should be. The coaches who ought to be conservative are the coaches that don't have a lot of talent and are just trying to extend the game and stay close as long as they can. If you've got the talent edge, and Georgia will have the talent edge in every game it plays, except maybe against Alabama and maybe against Ohio State, the only two programs that have out-recruited Georgia over the last half-decade. Every other game, Georgia's got more NFL-type bodies than the opponent. Given that as the scenario, Georgia ought to be the more aggressive team, playing faster, pushing the issue, and that's just never really quite been Kirby Smart's MO. As he matures as a coach, that's an area in which I hope his maturity brings about a change. I'd love to see Georgia, just generally speaking, be more aggressive. Bill Kibbe says, do you think we move the ball better when we're in a hurry-up offense? So there are times, Bill, when you can cite and say Georgia definitely moved the ball better. Kirby would say against Auburn, they were trying to get into a hurry-up offense and couldn't quite get that play that got them started and to go hurry up. I think also with big offensive linemen, you worry about them getting fatigued over the course of a long stretch of playing hurry-up, and I think that's ultimately why Georgia doesn't do it, is because you have to be consistently executing plays to sort of stay in hurry-up mode, and you've got to have little concern about your offensive linemen getting fatigued, which to an extent maybe Georgia has some of that. Over here on Facebook here for a moment, and then we're about 2 minutes, we're going to get off the air. Drew Odom says, I wonder if Kirby thinks we can score easier on defense than we can on offense. It's kind of an interesting thing to say. Drew, as I'm sure you're aware, as good as the Georgia defense has been, the one area in which it hasn't necessarily excelled right now are the turnovers and the defensive scores. You had one of those against Tennessee, and there haven't been a lot of those other than that. Can you imagine if late in the season, if the account turnover turns into a score? This is one of the things that people sometimes don't count in the goal of winning games is, maybe you have something fall in your lap here. A Georgia defense, which is as good as it is at breaking up passes, as good as it is at not yielding rushing yards, you add a game-changing turnover into that mix, a ball that gets taken back to the house. All of a sudden, complexion of games feels quite different after that. Brad Hodnett says, I know that they hunkered down in the end. What's up with giving up points all of a sudden in the fourth quarter? So, Brad, I think you can debate that a couple different ways. The Auburn game, was there a philosophical change? Did Georgia go into a zone? John Stinchcomb on our show last week said they did. So maybe there was a coaching error that led to that. Kirby denied changing the defensive philosophy. Other people said they saw that on the TV screen or from inside the stadium, Stinchcomb included. On Saturday, to my eyes, now Georgia may not quite have been playing as much press coverage as they had been playing, but to my eyes, it still looked like they were kind of in man coverage, I'm guessing. Best I could tell they were anyway, just not quite pressing at the line of scrimmage quite as hard as before. However, ultimately, I just think it's really hard to keep a team off the board for the full 60 minutes. I do. Kirby said they got tired. Georgia plays a lot of players. I'm not quite sure if they were as tired as Kirby said they were. I just think having this little margin for error for a defense is kind of a hard thing. I'm not trying to explain it away, but for the most part, I believe even during Auburn and even during A&M, the defense did its job. I understand your concern about the fact that a game that was an easy Georgia lead turned into a tight finish. I do get that. I think that speaks more to the challenge of being forced to keep teams almost completely off the scoreboard to win, more so than it does anything else. Chad Clark says, if we would have gotten that onside kick. Yeah, I know the rain helped this, but I'd give anything if I could get a wedge shot to sit down on a green the way that Hot Rod's onside kick just stopped on the ground. That was, like I said, heavy ball, probably still a wet field, helped that. But we said this last week about the Auburn onside kick attempt. The rules have almost made onside kicks impossible. Like, you can't do an onside kick the way that you used to think of them being done. You have to do one of two things. You either have to do what Georgia did, which is kick it over the head of the first wave of would-be blockers for the kick return, or you have to almost intentionally kick the ball at someone and hope it bounces off of a knee or a shin. That's not a very easy thing to do. That's harder to do than it sounds. But that's really about the only way you can really convert an onside kick now. If Georgia needs one, Hot Rod showed you on Saturday that he can get a little tricky thing in the air where that thing goes up and lands and it stopped. And it was there for the taking, and Georgia just couldn't quite hold on to it. But it was actually a pretty amazing attempt by Hot Rod. Justin Glaze talking about the replacement for Hot Rod. Yeah, that's going to be a challenge. I mean, Jared Zirkle's coming in. I don't believe he's coming in until the summer. The young man from Savannah is, I think, on campus right now. So they've got a collection of guys, but as dependable as Hot Rod, chances are, maybe not quite so much. Joel Moody on the subject of fake injuries, and the cat's kind of out of the bag on this a little bit, Joel. You know, Georgia is guilty of doing some of this itself. What Leon O'Neal, who's a good football player, but what O'Neal did Saturday, if you're going to fake it, you got to fake it better than this, right? I mean, some of these fake injuries now are just getting pathetic. I mean, everybody does the fake injury. I just think that there's an obligation to at least, put a little effort into the fake or something. I don't know. Some of these guys are barely even pretending to be hurt for very long. I think this is a very hard thing. You know, it's kind of like judging flopping in basketball or something like that. Some of these judgment calls are just hard to make. The officiating's not very good as it is. Bringing more judgment calls into who's faking an injury and who's not, I think that's asking for a disaster from officials who are just not very good at judgment sometimes. I think that the overall solution might be, and I don't quite know how you would do this, it would probably take an eye in the sky type thing. But if you leave the game because of an injury, I think right now you have to miss a play, then you can come back in. What if we said you got to miss more than a play? I feel like that, to me, might be the way to do that, because I do think just it's kind of an eyesore, all these fake injuries and all this stuff. It's just kind of a nuisance. And so the better solution may be you leave the game, you're out for 4 plays, you're out for 5 plays. Maybe it's 3 plays. Whatever it is, it's not 1 play. And maybe that discourages more guys from doing this. And obviously, if you do that, you're going to end up penalizing someone who really was hurt briefly, but that may just be the cost of doing business. Jeremy Lloyd says, what about the clap from the A&M linebacker that caused the weird snap that Fromm wasn't ready for? It's just a bad call. Refs didn't see it. But it's not, you can't simulate a snap count that way. Should have been called, and it just wasn't. The refs just missed it. Kirby was mad about it, though. Ooh, boy, was he mad about that. He was mad about that. Brian Whitehead says that there was a 2022 kicker prospect on campus for A&M, ranked 24th overall and 5th as a kicker for the 22 class, according to one of the websites out there that kind of grades the kickers. And when it comes to that kind of stuff, and Jeff's been pretty good at doing this in the past, you have to judge the kickers on the basis of how they're rated by kicking. I don't, with all due respect to the other major services who I think are actually pretty good at rating players overall, typically the kickers and punters are better rated by the sites that kind of only focus on kickers and punters. So, yeah. Spencer Edwards says, about Leon O'Neal. And listen, I'm telling you right now, O'Neal's a good player, but Spencer's right. It was an awful fake. I mean, it was just like the worst fake injury. Like, I'm not even so much mad that you're faking the injury. I just want to say, have you never watched pro wrestling? Have you never seen how to properly sell a fake injury? That part of it's what's the most offensive to me. Cam Smith says, do I think Sam Pittman leaves? I really don't. I think Pittman's happy. You know, you watch him during practice, he's like the most calm, collected, content guy in the world. I think he's happy. I don't think he's probably a real candidate for the Arkansas head coaching job. I don't mean that to disrespect him. I think he could be a great head coach if he wanted to be. Arkansas' situation right now is so bad, such a mess, that it's going to take a long time to fix. I mean, they have a lot of problems. So if you're Arkansas, you probably need to really try to hire a proven head coach if you can. And if you're Pittman, even if they offer the job to you, some of this you're going to eventually take the blame for. There's so little talent there, and such a challenge just given the geographic isolation Arkansas finds itself in. I don't know that you want to soldier the blame for how long this turnaround is going to take, because I do believe it probably takes a real long turnaround, unless the money people at Arkansas just start opening up the checkbooks, because there's a lot of rich boosters for Arkansas. The guy that just sold the Royals, Jerry Jones, obviously more of the Walmart people. There's a lot of rich boosters associated with Arkansas. You know, they could unleash the purse strings when they wanted to, but assuming that doesn't happen, the next coach at Arkansas is in for a long ride. And Sam Pittman looks like he enjoys life too much to get all that kind of stuff. Terry W. Says that this show doesn't want to end. Terry, you're welcome not to watch. And I obviously wouldn't say that to a Georgia fan, but since Terry's got the copycat Atlanta Braves logo on his YouTube avatar, you are more than welcome to go ahead and get an early start on your lunch if you'd like to, buddy. But we appreciate you checking in. Green Soldier, yeah. All right, but sure enough, we do have to go. We do have to go. Maybe the first time an Alabama fan's been right about anything. We do indeed have to go right now. Jay Harbaugh says maybe the Clintons will start supporting the Arkansas program. Jermaine King says, I hope the show goes another 2 hours. Appreciate that, Jermaine. Wish we could. One of these days, maybe we'll just stay on the air for I don't even know how long. But today, my boy Connor's not here, so that means I got to get the radio and podcast ready. So I've got to go do some real work. Richard Sheffield says, Pittman enjoys Athens restaurants too much to leave. Listen, my goal is to be as happy as Sam Pittman looks like he is. He's just kind of at peace with himself. He's comfortable in his own skin. He's good at his job. For as much as, you might want to be, whoever else, I mean, isn't Sam Pittman, he's just living well. He just seems like he's living well. So there you go. Oh, by the way, John William Adams mentions the Noah Sewell thing. We got to talk about that eventually. Yeah, we got to definitely make sure we get into that for sure. John Benton, thanks for the kind words. Pretty funny. Justin Glaze says an all-night telethon. You never know what we might do. I wonder if Facebook and YouTube would even let you stream for 24 hours, or if it would finally kick off after a while. That's a good question. Good question. Some of y'all would probably stop watching it after a while, but you never know what we might do. All right. Justin Glaze says a telephone to raise money for more microphones. That'd be funny. Good stuff. All right. Thank y'all for being here. Huge thanks to R.S. Andrews making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Don't forget, we will have Go With the Flow on Friday. That means we'll be picking all the games. Rivalry weekend, always kind of a fun time to be able to do that. So we got all of that coming up. Also, make sure you check out ajc.com for your Atlanta news now, heading towards the Thanksgiving weekend. If you're looking for a restaurant that's open, AJC's got a story up on that right now. Also, a little bit of intel on the tech side of things here this week. How the Jackets are getting ready for Georgia. Always good to get that from our buddy Ken Segura, ajc.com as well. You can follow up on the Jackets ahead of clean, old-fashioned hate on Saturday. And PSA here, it is clean, old-fashioned hate. If any of your friends this week, or, ne'er-do-wells in the media call it good, old-fashioned hate, that's not – I like a good, old-fashioned, but the name of the rivalry is clean, old-fashioned hate. All right, let's just make sure we keep that clean and keep that clear, I should say. I'm sure many of you are already aware of that as it is. Nonetheless, we must go. Thanks for being here. It's DawgNation Daily presented by Georgia United Credit Union. We'll look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow.